When you should probably use actually SQL Server, and there's several things. Number one is I don't like having to turn in work that might get corrupted. So when you have a pure access backend, there's always a possibility in the back of your mind that it'll get corrupted, and therefore people will lose data, they might see Chinese characters, performance might suffer. So whenever there's a significant amount of users, and to me that's like 3 or more users, that doesn't take much for me to go to SQL Server, suggest to the client that they use SQL Server Express. Another aspect is security of the data, right? So even if there's one user, but they're storing SQL Server, they're storing, for example, Social Security numbers, you got to use SQL Server Express. When you have data compliance issues, access is just not recommended for that. So you really want to use SQL Server when you have sensitive data. And Lucy and I were talking to a potential client this week, and it was a database that's used only by one person, but she had a column of Social Security numbers. And last week, the same thing. We had another client that we told him, look, you got to use SQL Server Express. And I am so hip to making sure they understand that. I actually write them an email saying, as a consultant, I want to let you know that Access is not the perfect place to store HIPAA-compliant information, and we recommend that you go to SQL Server. Because it's so easy to walk out with an Access file, right? You can just copy it to a USB drive and walk it out of the company. Another aspect is you may have several people using the database, and some of them are VPN, like traveling salesmen. And so you may have an individual who, at the end of the day, may go to a hotel room, log into the network via VPN, and want to use the database. Well, you got to use SQL Server, no matter how many users that is. The other aspect of this is you may have people who don't use VPN. Like we develop solutions that are internet-based. They're not over VPN. And so we host the data in our hosting center for those clients. And I call that Internet Cafe users because they can go to Starbucks, they can go to Panera Bread, they can use their cell phone, tethered with a cell phone to their laptop, they can be at home. Anywhere there is internet access, they can use the solution after they log in. So it's not so much a corporate network. In fact, there is no corporate network. It's just them using the database over the web. And, of course, when you're dealing with large data sets, that's when you probably should use SQL Server. So these are all good reasons. Let's just go quickly to the next slide here. All right. And make sure you mute your microphones. If not, we may have to do that. So, Lucy, let me know if we have to mute the microphone. All right. So your first major decision is to determine what version of SQL Server works best for you. And so there's several factors here. And basically my experience has been any version of SQL Server Express is fine as long as 2008 R2 or better. So you have 2008 R2, 2012, 2014. So why would you pick, for example, 2012 over 2014? Well, that depends also on the IT department. I have worked with clients who want me to make sure that I check with our IT departments that what version of SQL Server they currently have. Like obviously, if it's a large IT department, they may already have an instance of SQL Server already running, and I haven't had any case where I can't use a slice of somebody's SQL Server in the enterprise. And I'm not sure why this is just showing me close this. The other aspect of this is there's a need for TDE. Now, TDE is a feature of SQL Server Enterprise. And what that is basically encrypts the files where your data is located. So that if, in theory, those files got compromised, let's say, for example, the network got breached and a hacker were to copy those files off network to some other storage medium in the Internet, they still wouldn't be able to mount that SQL Server database because they don't have the security certificates. It's encrypted already. And that's called TDE. And it's a really nice feature. We have that enabled at our hosting center. But you need to buy SQL Server Enterprise in order to use it. Lucy, let me know if you can't hear me well. Forgot to ask you. I think you should. You hear me. Otherwise, I would have heard back from you, buddy. Another aspect is SQL Server Express doesn't come with any job scheduling. So if job scheduling is important to you, job scheduling, I'll give you, for instance, maybe you have a nightly import that you want to do, and or maybe you want to have some sort of automation with jobs, either backups or scheduling. None of that comes with Express. Now, there are third-party tools that you can use with Express, and we use them, but if you're job scheduling or executing jobs, well, you can execute jobs with SQL Server Express now, but you just can't schedule them. So you can't. That's what we use. We use a Windows scheduler along with jobs in SQL Server Express. But if you need heavy-duty job scheduling in SQL Server, then it really is a need to do that, right? And using either Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition. There's some other advanced features present in Standard and Enterprise versions that are not available in Express. For example, SQL Server Integration Services does not come with Express, which is a real shame because there is sometimes a need to import a wide range of data on a regular basis. And of course, data mirroring. But let's face it, if you need data mirroring, you probably didn't start with an Access database to begin with, right? You probably would do data mirroring after you migrate to SQL Server, and it's become a much more critical application. At that point, you would hire the company may hire a DBA to take care of that. But for the most part, every time we've upgraded from Access to SQL Server, 99% of the time we use Express. So which version SQL Server? As long as you pick Express 2008 or 2 or better, you should be fine. If there's no preference for the version, then just go with 2014, which is the latest. All right, in my next slide here, we're going to talk about security. Now, a lot of these topics I've covered already in prior chats at the Access User Group. So if you want a more in-depth discussion of security, please check the prior videos on our website, AccessUserGroups.org. And I've talked about security models before in the past. So when you choose a security model, there's pros and cons of each, right? There's two security models. There's Windows security or SQL Server security. Windows security is a lot easier for people who are not SQL Server. So if you have a small firm that has 1 or 2 people in IT, you can set up Windows security with the Active Directory, and then they create Active Directory groups, and you can validate those groups into your SQL Server database to provide them with rights, tables, and then so when they hire the employee, they can just add the employee to the right groups and SQL Server to get them to use their program. So it's really easy network administrators. The downside to that is once you give them rights to the database, they can open Excel and import the data into Excel. So that's why it's not as secure as the second solution, which is SQL Server security. In the second security model, what we've done in that case is, again, most of the times is create a user table, and we have people log into the app, and the app checks against the user table, and then the application, the Access front end, stores the username and password. So the users don't even know what the SQL Server account is or what the password is. So there's no way for data to be compromised with Excel. So if you really need to make sure that people don't walk away with your data, you got to convince your client then to use SQL Server security and then use a user table with that in order to minimize exposure or surfaces, if you will, that will compromise your data. All right. And that's the model we use for Internet Cafe solutions, right, where and that's the same model you use on every website on the planet, right? When you log into, for example, a Microsoft site, and your credentials are stored in a database, and you're not really logging into Windows security. Now, we have developed Internet Cafe solutions with Active Directory logins. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to provide them with SQL Server reporting services. So it made it easier. But since we figured out how to run SQL Server reports without doing Active Directory, so now we're back to using the SQL Server security for all our solutions now. And if you have any questions, please say in the chat window, and I'll address those for you. All right. So if you're going to use SQL Server, your best route would be to use SQL Server Migration Assistant for Access. They have several versions of SSMA, one for Oracle, another one for other databases, but make sure you get the Access version. Make sure you download the latest version. I actually have a blog post on our website that talks about how to get the latest version of SSMA for Access. And then you want to configure SSMA with the options to. Now, the first one, add primary keys. Let's face it, you should really add your primary keys before you migrate to SQL Server, because one of the issues I've talked over and over again during these sessions is if you're not careful, you're going to be moving problems from Access into SQL Server, right? You want to fix any issues you have with a database design in Access first, such as adding primary keys, such as adding secondary keys or foreign keys to your tables, making sure the database design is sound before you migrate to SQL Server. But guess what? If you migrate to SQL Server before that, you haven't done it yet, you just magnified your problems. And now you got even more issues. And the whole reason that you migrate to SQL Server to begin with is to improve the safety of the data and the speed of the solution. And it's not going to improve either of those if your database is not right. We always recommend timestamps to all tables, and the nice thing about SSMA is during the course of the project, we'll invariably upload the latest data over and over again, right? So, for example, when we first create the SQL Server database, the client gives us a copy of their Access backend, and then we'll create the alpha version of the system, and then before we show them the alpha version, we get their latest backend in Access. We upload it to SQL Server using SSMA, and it's really easy, and we talked about that in the prior session, to just right-click in SSMA, it's like migrate data, and it uploads the latest data to your SQL Server database. And then prior to rollout, which we're going to be talking about here in a minute, you can do it again. So throughout the life of the project, you're going to be uploading that data over and over again. Your best bet there is to save the SSMA project so that you can then open it up again the second, third, or fourth time and just migrate the back end. That saves you hours of work. We used to do that with custom queries in SQL Server. Not anymore. We use SSMA for that. Now, that will only work if you haven't had any major changes to the table structures, right? So if, for example, going back to my example where you did not fix issues, you create the SQL Server tables, you realize it's all messed up, and you start to implement a whole series of changes, such as changing column names and table names and doing a wide range of changes, then you won't be able to use SSMA to migrate the data. So that's another good reason why you want to fix issues first in Access before you upload it to SQL Server. This is going to be a short chat, by the way, and this is not going to take us too much time. All right, so SSMA can migrate your queries, and for the most part, we choose not to migrate queries. All the queries and create views in Access, although SSMA will do that for you. We like to run these queries in Access first, and if there's any issues, then we create views for them in SQL Server. So, of course, if it's too slow in Access, then we create those, we convert those queries over to views. Another aspect of why we don't use SSMA is a lot of queries in the solution we come across use temp bars, or they use parameters, where you can't create a parameterized view in SQL Server. So, it would fail anyway. SSMA would just not upload your query to the view. Plus, when we create views, we like to make sure they're optimized with their query plan. is a critical aspect. We do, what I do is I create the view using a regular query in SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio. And then I press Control L to analyze the query plan and we see if there's any missing indexes. And then once I'm happy with the results of the query, then I go and I create the view in SQL Server. I add a line above the SQL syntax says create view, and the query view name as, right? So let me just show you what I mean by that. All right, so say, for example, I have a select order ID from orders. I mean, this is a very simple query. You probably wouldn't do create view for this, but just an example, right? So I make sure I highlight the query and then press Control L and make sure that there's no missing indexes. And when I'm satisfied with the query is correct, then I come in here and add a line, create view W, order ID, and as, right? And then it just creates that view for me. So I don't have to launch a view window to create a view and paste the SQL code there. I just, from any query in SQL Server Management Studio, I can just create the view by adding the create view name as, right? So, when it comes to probably speeding up your Access database, creating views is the best tool you have in your toolbox to optimize the application. So at this point, what we would do is we would stop after creating views, right? So what typically happens is our Access developers will test using our lab environment, and then once they identify queries that might be an issue, they create those views, and then we hand it to the customer. And so let's move on to the next slide here. The customer then takes that alpha version, and we tell them, look, you're going to run against speed issues, and if you do, you need to decide if you want us to optimize it, because obviously every hour that we spend on it is an hour they'll have to pay for. So if, for example, it's too slow, well, what is too slow, right? And I like to talk about the 3-second rule. If it takes more than 3 seconds to run a query in Access, it's probably a good candidate for a view or store procedure conversion. But not everybody agrees with that. But some people, when they see the potential for a huge bill, they say, oh, I can live with 10 seconds. Or say, for example, in Access, when it was just a pure Access solution, a report or query would take a minute and a half, and now it takes 30 seconds. They're ecstatic about that. They're like, oh, my gosh, this is so much faster. It only took 30 seconds to create run this query when it used to take me a minute and a half. And to me, 30 seconds, I would die, right? I'm waiting for something to run 30 seconds, and I would say, look, we can optimize this to maybe 10 seconds or 5 seconds or even 3 seconds. You want us to spend the time on that. And so what ends up happening then is you have what we call rounds of optimization, where I hand over to the client the database. After I install SQL Server on their system, I will upload their latest data because people want to see their latest data to this testing, right? So before I give them the alpha version, I again ask for the old Access backend. I use SSMA to upload their data. I install the alpha version on their desktop along with the old version in Access, and then now they can safely compare both versions in SQL and Access. And I say, look, use the database. Add orders, delete orders, run reports, run your queries, run your normal processes, and report back any issues that you're finding with speed or bugs. And if you do have those speed issues, then we'll address those. And sometimes it's just a question of tweaking a view, right, or creating a data set. So, if normally an Access developer, and I'm guilty of this too, an Access developer may have a query upon query, right, a tower of queries to find the final results. So how many times we've created 2, 3, 4, 5 queries, and the 5th query is the one you use in the report, but in order to run the report, the 5th query is executing all those other prior queries, right? So it's query upon query. Now, you would think that to do that in SQL Server, you could create multiple views, and you would be right. You can do it that way, where you can create those 5 views, and then the 5th view is the one that's executing the results and returning it back to Access. That, however, is not the recommended way. The recommended way to do that would be is through data sets, right? So, for example, if I have and back to this here, I may have a data set here. So I may say with order ID, or I don't want to use the order ID field, so I'm going to say my order IDs, just to distinguish it. My order IDs as, and then I'll put a parenthesis, and then I'll put the SQL syntax in there, and then the parenthesis. And then if I have a second data, so that's my first query. I may have a second query, and then the second query I'm going to call it as my invoices, right? My invoices as, and then open parenthesis, and then my SQL syntax and close parenthesis. And then here I'll say, okay, select invoice ID as from invoices, right? And now I'm ready to do my final query. I could have a third and fourth. I would just use comma. For the final one, you won't use a comma, so there's no comma here, excuse me. And then I'll say, okay, select my order IDs dot order ID, right? And then my invoices dot invoice ID from, and then there I would use the right from my order ID, my order IDs, and then they would have to link these using something. So this is why this is not going to be a good example, but you would then link where my from my order IDs, and then you would create that link between the two data sets, like you normally would link with 2 tables, 2 queries. The same thing, right? Where say from my order IDs, and then my invoice ID equal invoice ID equal maybe invoices ID is what you use to link the two data sets. So this methodology of using data sets is the preferred method in SQL Server Express. SQL Server. This will be faster than creating 5 views or 3 views or 2 views in this case, and linking them together for a 3rd view. So always consider using data sets. It's a lot more difficult to do, but it is faster than doing it with individual views. The other aspect of this, of course, is that the view is stored, the data set is stored, the data set is stored on the SQL Server, and of course it's saved along with the execution plan. I made chili. Please help yourself. I'm on the web with a conference in LA. So I made chili today. Sorry, I can't offer it to everybody. It was kick-ass chili, that chili night. Yeah.
There's a package I brought in for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Are you going to stick around for dinner?
No, I said I got home for
Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Okay. It was my daughter-in-law. We just came to pick up a package. All right. So, all right, we have a question here. Great, I love questions. So, when you migrate the Access database in SSMA, you only migrate tables. And then, let me just get closer to here, and then convert client queries into server views as needed. Yeah, that's what we do. We don't convert every query to a view. We only convert those queries that will benefit from a view, right? Okay, so thank you for the question, whoever submitted that. Appreciate that. And that was from George. All right. So, what ends up happening is this round of optimization, think of it as an elliptical curve, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to spend more and more time optimizing, and at the same time, it's going to cost you more and more money, right? So it gets more expensive for less return on your investment, right? So say, for example, going back to our analogy where we created the view in SQL Server, now 30 seconds instead of a minute and a half, right? So that took me maybe half an hour. Then the client says, well, this needs to be faster, so I'll go back and fine-tune the view. I'll analyze the query plan. I'll fine-tune the query plan, add additional indexes. That takes me an hour. And what did I save? 15 seconds. Now it's 15 seconds faster. And the client says, no, we need it faster. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to take me longer. Then I converted that view to maybe to a stored procedure in order to optimize it even further. And that might take me an hour and a half. But at some point, you're just not going to get it many more faster, right? Because then you bump into aspects you don't control, such as memory on the server and server cores and so forth, and just not be able to optimize it. So I always look at it as an elliptical query, and I always let the client know, no, as we go through it, it'll be more and more expensive. All right. So you created your Access database, you went through the alpha version, you went through the beta version, and now you're ready to start using the system, right? You're ready to convert over, cut over. Well, I like cutting over on Friday afternoons because usually Friday afternoons are the less hectic and they're not shipping out. Usually they ship out before Friday, like on Thursdays, it's a heaviest ship day. But every business is different, right? Most of the times we cut over Friday afternoon. Why? Because if we have an issue, we can come in Saturday morning and address it and then be ready by Monday morning. Or if Saturday we can't fix it, then Sunday we can come in and it's happened to us. We correct the issue and we come back in and then Monday they're ready. But if you cut over on a Wednesday afternoon and they're coming in Thursday morning to use the database, that's cutting it close. And if it's a simple database, yeah, you could do it Wednesday afternoon. Nobody said you can do it Wednesday morning if you want to. But a lot of times the reason they're going to SQL Server is because it's a mission-critical app that the business absolutely needs to be running at all times in order to be able to run, in order to ship widgets out the door. All right? So one aspect of this is you upload their latest data. How did you know that the upload was successful? You may, for example, SSMA will tell you, oh, we uploaded all these records by table. And that's great. But then the fact is that how do you know that that data is migrated over correctly? Well, what we do is we run reports. We run reports on the old version and reports on the new version. We compare the uploaded reports. They need to be identical. Otherwise, you can't cut over, right? So the reports have to be identical. I got my little dog Mochi here. Wants to say hi to everybody. Why don't you say hi to everybody, huh? This is Mochi. He's not a SQL Server expert, so he's been calling him right there all the time. So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you check the reports and that they match. Because if they don't match, it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to call into question your work, right? And of course, you want to do that before you cut over the last version, right? You make sure reports match at the beta phase. But it's a good check when you do the final cutover to check your reports that they match. And then you have to have an emergency action plan. Why do I say that? Because it could be, let's say for example, we cut over on Friday. And then Monday everybody comes in, everything looking great, fine. Then Tuesday morning it blows up on you, and this happened to me recently, where the whole thing just blew up on me. Why? Because there were some procedures that they never executed during the alpha beta version in Access. They had some macros that they had set up, and they would run every morning, and they neglected to tell me this. And so when they came in Tuesday morning, the whole thing was just blow up, and they were down. And they were down for 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. And finally, Wednesday afternoon, I said, you know what, we just got to cut our losses and go back to the old version of Access. So we had to go back and have them go back to the old Access version and then enter data for Monday and Tuesday in the old Access version so that they can then be up to speed by Thursday, which is what their shipping day was. So needless to say, I was not happy about the whole thing. And it just goes to show you that it happens to the best of us. You just don't know, right? You have to plan for the unpredictable. You have to emergency plan. And so because I prep management, I said, this is what our emergency action plan is. If this thing fails, we're going to go back to the old version. We're going to do this, this, and that. So I told them, I said, make sure, hi, honey.
Hi, babe.
My wife just walked in. I said, make sure that they save the data and the paperwork every day that we're using your version. And so they saved the data paperwork, and so now they're able to do that. And that's why they were able to recover. All right, so after you've done the upgrade, there are several things you want to make sure, for example, that the client understands that they need to back up their database. And one of the drawbacks of SQL Server Express is it doesn't come up with any backup solutions. Yes, you can back up your database manually, but you're not expecting your client to walk up to the server every hour or every day, every night, and back that up. So we recommend SQL Server Backup and STP, which is a program you can purchase to back up SQL Server Express. If it's a standard version of SQL Server, the enterprise version, it does come in with backups and backup scheduling, so you create backup jobs. And the reason I mention this is because more often than not, you're the DBA, right? They're counting on you to make sure it gets backed up because they don't know any better, right? If everything they installed, I've had clients who never asked me about backup until I brought it up. Oh yeah, how are we going to back that up? Well, you're going to use. I tell them we use SQL Server Backup STP along with Dropbox to back up those files in Dropbox. Why Dropbox? Because if it's on Dropbox, it's stored in the cloud. And what's in the cloud is there's a problem there's several situations where you can lose your data locally. There could be a fire at the local place. There could be a theft.
Quiet.
Yeah. And we're having some feedback here, so let me just mute everybody. Lucy, I think I can just do that from the menu here. Hold on a second. All right, let's see. Audio and video. Well, the feedback stopped, so I'm just going to continue. We're almost done anyway. So, there could be a fire at the office. It could be a theft. Somebody breaks in at night and steals a server. There could be a mechanical failure where the server hard drive goes bad, the motherboard goes bad, and you lost everything there, including your backups, your local backups. That's why we back over Dropbox. And in this day and age, you should always back up. And one of the first things some clients are going to tell you is, oh, I don't want my data in the cloud. They tell you flat out, I don't want my data in the cloud. I don't believe in that. I got news for you. Your data's already in the cloud. I can pay somebody $30 and get everything about you. Your credit report, who you married to, your social security number, everything. It cost me $30. Your data's already in the cloud. Get over it. The fact that you're not in the cloud is a myth. Everybody's in the cloud. And so this data needs to be in the cloud because it needs to be safeguarded as opposed to using a tape system. I did have a client just the other day still using tapes. How do you know those tapes work? Are you verifying that? You don't know. Well, at least with Dropbox, I can go into Dropbox and see the zip files that SQL Server Backup and STP do. All right, so consider that you are going to probably be responsible to make sure that disaster recovery is you're also touch base with that. If they don't have an IT department, you're it. If you're the one to suggest the SQL Server Express, it's your responsibility to come up with a backup plan. It's your responsibility to come in there, do yearly maintenance or more than twice a year maintenance. Add additional indexes to fix speed issues. So you're it, right? So that's pretty much for me today, guys. I really appreciate you coming out here. Now is the time for questions and answers. Any questions and answers? I see some questions here, and excuse me as I get close to here. What do you think about SQL Server Developer Edition, $60 Microsoft versus Express for development? Yeah, I love SQL Server Developer Edition, right? But the fact is, if your client is not going to use Standard or Enterprise, because SQL Server Development Edition, same thing as Enterprise, only costs you $60. If your client's not going to use them, then you should develop whatever your client is using, right? Because that way, if there's any issues, you come across them right away. Because if you develop under SQL Server Developer Edition, and you create jobs that run every night, and then go install it at the client site, and they have SQL Express, that's going to be a rude awakening for you, because then you're not going to be able to run those jobs. Right, so always develop in the same environment your clients are going to be using it. So that's a great question. Yeah, it's very cheap, but it's not the same thing. All right, let's see here. All right, anybody else has any comments, questions? You guys are a quiet bunch. No, I wish you guys had more questions for me. Did you like the presentation?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Who is that?
Linda Ewan.
All right, Linda.
Interestingly enough, I have a client where I just met with them today, a potential client, and they want to use, they have some very, very secure data they need to secure. So I kind of wasn't that crazy about SQL Server. The maintenance is a little more of an issue than, an Access database. But your talk has convinced me I have to look at it a little bit differently because, frankly, their data is super sensitive, and
let's talk a little bit about that because I didn't touch too much about that. I just want to make sure I take a few minutes and go over that a little bit more detail. And let's go over the example of Social Security number, right? I mean, how many times you see the column in the table, employee table, one column is Social Security number. Now, the way we handle that is we take the Social Security number out of the employee table. And we create one column, a single table to hold that sensitive data, and then we encrypt that column in SQL Server, so that you must have you must have the security rights to see the Social Security number. That's the nice thing about that approach. The second is somebody were to steal the underlying table, they would have no way to decrypt that column. And so that's how we do it. The other aspect of this is we leave a 4-digit Social Security number in the original employee table, and they see the last 4 digits. And that's usually enough because I have yet to come across a situation where the whole company needs to see the Social Security number. Why? I tell my client, why does everybody here have to see my Social Security number? Why can't they just see the last 4 digits?
Yeah.
And when a customer calls in, they can say, okay, sir, your last 4 digits is 9999. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, I got the right customer then. Right? Because I combine that with your name and your birth date and so forth.
Well, the other thing is, you may not be aware of this, but the Social Security numbers, the first few digits are often like region. In other words, so unfortunately, you might be able to get more information out of those last 4 digits than you think you can.
Yeah, my wife and I, she was born a year before. She has the same first 3 digits that I do. So both of us have the same 3 digits.
But it's, because, Social Security was done long before anyone, first of all, Social Security should never have been done the way it was. It should have had, a check digit. I mean, it shouldn't just be a bunch of numbers.
Well, my understanding is that Europe doesn't have the same issue. My understanding that identity theft in Europe is almost non-existent because they don't use Social Security numbers for to identify people. And I read the article and I can't remember for the life of me what is that they used over there that's more secure than we do.
Yeah, I don't know. But
I've got another question here. For someone who does access the SQL Server, what do you think about that's the same question. Does SQL Server have the same speed as SQL? Great question. No, because SQL Azure is always going to be slower than a local copy of SQL Server, right? Because of the fact that you're going through the web to access that data. So the fastest way to get SQL Server is to install SQL Server locally on that machine. And then the second way would be to have it on network. And then the third fastest way is to have it on the web, which is Azure, right? So Azure is always going to be slower than a local copy of SQL Server. The other aspect of this is that Ben, who's a book author, he's my number one employee at IT Impact, he has one of our clients is got people using a solution in the Far East, in India. And so they have a call center in India, and then they have a manager group in the United States. And so what happened is when he first rolled out the solution, it was using Azure database here in the United States, and there was complaints in India that was too slow.
Yeah.
And so Azure has that synchronization capability. So what he did was he migrated the database to India, and then he created another database for the U.S. folks, and then he synchronizes it over to Azure so that the U.S. folks are using the U.S. database and India folks are using the India database.
Interesting.
They're both using Access. Both parties still using Access. So if you're thinking about, I mean, I love Azure, right? But it's just, but there is the different tiers in Azure, right? Because Azure, they don't sell you the machine, but rather they sell you a database service, and then you can find through Azure. I am not an expert in Azure, but I can only tell you that Azure is going to be slower than having a local copy of SQL Server. All right, we have another question here from Andy. Hey, Andy. So are they syncing Azure to Azure? Yeah, they're syncing Azure to Azure. So you have multiple regions, and India region is syncing with the U.S. region. And I think it's one way. I think it would be a nightmare to have a two-way communication, right? When something happens in the United States, it's got to sync with India. But we're definitely working a lot faster for them. And there's also Latin America data centers. That's I think what Microsoft has. They have the American data centers. So you have somebody in Latin America, you can implement the same solution. Geo replication. Okay, yeah. It's, George saying geo replication Azure SQL DB. Yes, another option would be do terminal services. And honestly, Microsoft has that remote app, which is 50 users, so you could go that route and pay Microsoft. It's a wonderful plan because what ends up paying is you end up paying, I think it's $250 a month, and you get 50 users and you get so many minutes, and after you use up all those minutes, there's no surcharge. So it's really an unlimited plan, in my view. But you could use terminal services with Azure. They call it a remote app, and it's just a wonderful sphere. I have a problem with terminal services because then, it's not local, right? In other words, if I want to create an email, so think about this. Let's say, for example, I develop a solution for an internet cafe application where they need to send out emails to customers. I'm getting feedback again, guys. Somebody they want to mute their microphone. But you create an email. You can't do that with terminal servers unless you have Office installed on terminal services, and then you got to have Outlook configured on terminal services, and it does present some sort of problems with that. So great question there, Andy. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Andy, by the way, is the Access MVP and also the leader for Access Web Apps. And Andy and I actually had a chance to do a video for Channel 9. It's coming out this June. We did that during the prior MVP conference. And by the way, there's a Power BI conference, Andy, at Microsoft. Is the first Power BI conference ever. I was thinking maybe we can go out there and participate in the Power BI conference and then either arrive early or a couple of days earlier or stay later to do more videos. Let me know about that. I hadn't emailed you about that. No. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that email or not. But Microsoft has some really nice recording facilities at the campus where you can record videos, and you don't have to be an MVP. They're actually looking for content, and there's very little videos in Access. And so one of the things that Andy and I were talking about is to fly out there out throughout the year, at least one besides the MVP conference, and actually record additional videos. So look forward to doing that. And and there's Power Apps. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but Power Apps is coming out, and it may behoove you to take a look at that. Power Apps from Microsoft. Just it's something very interesting. All right, so if there's no more questions, I appreciate you guys coming out on a busy Tuesday. I don't have a topic for next month. Let me know what topic you'd like to have. Linda, do you have an idea for a topic for next month?
No, but I will think of one.
All right.
I will try to think of
one. Please let me know. And yes. if you want to present, Andy, if you want to present on my group and as well, anybody who wants to do a presentation, it doesn't have to be me all the time, but you stick a quarter of me, I'll talk all night.
No, so it's great. Your presentations are great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. By the way, did you register for PAW? Because they sold out in like 50 minutes.
For who?
Did you have a chance to plug the Portland Access User Group meeting in the mountains?
Well, I don't tend to travel much to user groups.
Okay. I think I know if it was you I thought, but they're sold out. I know Andy and I usually they reserve spots for us because we go as presenters every year.
Nice.
But it's a Access conference and it's only 50 people max, and they actually sold out. And the same day it came out, and it's just amazing. And one of the things that really bothers me is that Andy had wanted to set up a cruise, an Access cruise, where we're out at sea, and we want to do that. And I signed up, and any excuse to get out of the office and have the company pay for a cruise, I'm there. But we didn't get enough people to participate, and then they sell out at POG, and it wasn't a cruise, and it's out in the mountains. I don't know. I just hope that one day we can still go back to the cruise.
Well, some of my colleagues are saying. Some of my colleagues are saying that, and even the client I was at today, that there isn't that much use of Access, and they're finding that young people just don't want to get into it. They want to do .NET. They don't want to spend their career in it.
That's my biggest frustration.
Okay.
Just finding consultants that as my business grows.
Yeah.
And so what ends up doing is I end up getting a .NET person and I train them to do Access. And that's not a perfect solution because they want to stay in .NET, but
Right.
Or I take somebody who has business acumen, who for example, was a finance manager at a company, and they so happen to love Access and they just want to be an Access consultant. And I'll take them on board under my wing and develop them to be Access consultants. I'm not going to go to the local college and hire somebody. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's just not.
I understand.
So, Eddie, are you going to the POD conference this year? I hope so. We can always look forward to seeing you out there. So, all right, great to hear. All right, well, look, the state of Microsoft Access is getting stronger. It's one thing I wanted to leave you with, because today's the State of the Union. And if you haven't done so, please go to Access User Voice. Lend your voice. The Access team does look at it. Something that is not public knowledge, but I can say here is they actually came out to Chicago and visited one of my clients, one of the program managers at Microsoft. So they are reaching out to the community. They're doing a lot more. And so I expect nothing but better things from this current group of managers at Microsoft. So here's hoping that they listen to our cause and we end up with a much better product.
I don't know, because Microsoft called me, I guess, several months ago after I had completed the Access 2013 online, which George Hepworth was involved with, and I think it was presented to the MVPs, and I listed 22 issues that it had. And they called me, right? And they said to me, well, you're right, but we're too big to fix them. So I always question their seriousness. Yes, I mean, if you look, fortunately the user, they're not using it. I got paid for it, but the screen design is horrible. They say, oh, the users don't care about the screen design. You tell me the user who doesn't care about what the screen looks like.
So, Linda, were those people from the Access product team, or who were they?
I think it was. I don't know, but the other thing.
Do you know any of their first names or anything?
I could try to get them if you want.
Because we're going to hunt them down. I could try to remember. Because
Juan and I met several. Juan and I know many of them.
You know what? I'll tell you what. If in the future,
has it been over a year?
I can send it to you. I don't think it's been a year. It might have been. I lose track of time, but it was very, very disappointing, and the system looks horrible.
Right, and I'll tell you that when Juan and I were at the MVP Summit this past fall, and they've really switched over the people that are in charge, and they've told us that they're dedicating resources to it, and they're really paying attention to what the users are saying. And I think that there's a real change of heart. For the last 2 years, they've been telling us Access is dead. We're only going to be going Access web apps, and we're not going to be making changes to Access desktop. Well, at the conference, they said yes, they're actively making changes to desktop, and they said, they are putting resources there, and it seems like the group that's there in the product team really cares now.
I just don't get that strong sense, there's so many issues with the thing. People even question why I bother using Access, and I say, because it's ubiquitous. I say, even the client today, I said, if I win the lottery in a weak moment, I forget where I am, you can find someone else to support it. But just so many stupid things, like, in the new versions of Access from, I guess, I don't know, I have to remember whether it's Access 2010 and up, they leave an inch space for the tables. It's just hell looking through it. That is just stupid.
Yeah.
These are just idiotic things, and it wouldn't take that long to fix. I don't know what's wrong with them. And then when you click on a table, this may be more difficult to fix, but you click on a table and the mouse moves. And at first I thought it was just my computer, but that's not the case. It's like there are just so many stupid issues with it. In fact, my group laughs at me, but I have a lot of clients who I still keep in Access 97. Several, maybe not a lot, and they love it. It works fine. It's solid. So they were told it wouldn't work on Windows 10. Got news for you. It works on Windows 10. It's solid.
I thought it
doesn't
wasn't
corrupt.
possible. How did you get it to work in Windows 10? I thought it wasn't possible.
No problem at all. Not even a ghost of a problem. You have more problem converting the back end to SQL Server, which I don't think is such a big thing, but no problem at all. One of my clients just happens, he likes on his home computer, he runs a small, thing, and he threw up Windows 10. He said, look, if it doesn't work, we'll work it out. And it worked perfectly. And I think I have someone else who's also doing it with Windows 10.
That's great.
There are definitely occasional features. I had to go to Access 2013 to do the online thing, as stinky as it looks. But for the most part, Access 97 does, pretty much everything I needed to do. And my blood pressure drops when I'm working with it.
Oh, boy. Well, the fact is that we expect great things from this group, but the proof is in the pudding, so we'll see what happens in 2016 when it comes out, the next version comes out. I asked them, so how many developers do you have in Excel? How many developers do you have in Word? How many have in Access? Well, I can't tell you the answer because it's NDA, but you can probably suspect what the answer is. We expect they have limited resources, but they have a much better attitude than the prior management group, so we're hoping that they do it much better. And but do check Power Apps and see. Let me know what your thoughts are on that.
Power Apps. What is Power Apps? I'm not familiar with it, but I'll make a note to look it up.
Power Apps is a new technology rolled out by Microsoft and Azure that is probably what Access Web Apps should have been.
Okay.
And it looks much better than Access Web Apps. Has its limitations, looks like Access Web Apps, but
can you code in Power Apps? Can you do actual real code?
I haven't dabbled as much in it as maybe Andy.
Well,
Andy, have you dabbled in it at all?
I signed up for it.
That would be a great presentation.
I signed up for it, but didn't do it, and then I just got an email this past week that you have to re-sign up for it because they cleared the sandbox. So if you go to powerapps.com or powerapps.microsoft.com, either way, you can sign up to be part of it.
Okay.
And you basically you put in your email address, and then after that it says why do you think you should be a part of this.
Well, is that a topic for next month?
Well, it might be.
It doesn't have to be perfect. You know what I tell the presenters at our SIG group in New York? I said, we're not buying the product. We want to see, the issues that you have. We want to, we want the whole thing.
I think it's really the bleeding edge of technology. It's brand new. I think it's their answer to allowing apps to work on iPhone, because you've got companies like Alpha Anywhere and those kind of things that can do it.
Alpha Anywhere presented to us as well. And also there's a German company that claims that they can move access to the web. I haven't had the recent need to it, but I don't think I would use Access on the web again. That was hellish.
No. By the way, Linda, you still meeting in Times Square?
Well, yeah, Times Square, absolutely. I would love to have you present at some point, but frankly, you present enough, and what I do is I tell everybody, I send out an email that you're presenting, and hopefully, they pick up on it. The ones who have always thanked me. So,
thank you. Thank you.
And for some crazy reason, we are actually getting a lot of people, so I'm not sure whether Access is not coming back to life because
keep in mind,
Andy,
next time you're in New York, please connect with Linda so see if you can present at Times Square. It's a wonderful office they have there at Microsoft.
Cool.
Yeah, no,
I was just out there.
Last month we actually only had one chair left. I figured someone was going to have to stand, but it worked out.
Very good, very good. All right, well, thanks a lot, everybody, for this month.
Thank you,
for coming
Juan,
out.
really.
I appreciate it. This is a labor of love, so a couple of things I want to ask you if you can really help me out is go back to LinkedIn, and there's a SQL Server with Access group that I head up. And leave a comment there, good, bad, whatever about the meeting. Tweet
how do we do
it.
that?
You can go to LinkedIn. I have a group there called MS Access with SQL Server.
Okay.
Or even on my profile. You can leave a comment on my profile.
All right.
In LinkedIn and tweet about it if you have a Twitter account.
I'm not even sure you and I are linked in together, but I'll send something so that you can. We can link up
great.
together. Okay?
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.